Hello, and welcome to another issue of Back Issue Breakfast Club. I'm your host, Kelly Guentner of Phoenix Sisters Cosplay, and today we're going to talk about X-Men Black. Alright, so this book is a series of short stories featuring some of the villains of the X-Men universe, and really the only thread that ties these stories together is that each of the villains has a formative moment that just is defining to them. So it's kind of interesting to see how each of the stories is tied together. So the very first story is about Magneto, who is one of my favorites in the X-Men universe. Magneto is basically the Malcolm X to Charles Xavier's Martin Luther King Jr. For anyone who didn't realize that the X-Men forms a lot of parallels to the Civil Rights Movement. The writer for the Magneto story is Chris Claremont, penciler Dalibor Talahik, I'm butchering the name, and inkers Roberto Poggi and Bellardino Bravo, color artist Dono Sanchez. And the Magneto story, what I really liked about the art was a lot of expression in the character's facial expressions. So the Magneto story basically starts with him in a restaurant before he goes on a solo mission, and he meets up with a young waitress called Kate. And Kate is a normal human who is sympathetic towards mutant kids who have been imprisoned for being mutants. So that kind of sets the stage for a different kind of story, real personal story. Next up, we have a really wacky, fun, but also kind of sweet story featuring Mojo, who is, he's from an alternate reality, and then he's stuck in the main Marvel universe, and he sees himself as a director, and everything's about getting good ratings. So he attacks the X-Men to get good ratings. Writer for this is Scott Aukerman, artist Nick Bradshaw, and Andre Lima. The art for this really fits the story. It really captures Mojo's kind of a weird-looking guy. He runs into an X-Men who bonds with him because this X-Men's kind of a weird-looking dude, too. And they kind of bond over being freaks in New York. But New York City doesn't really bat an eye because they've seen weirder, which is fitting for New York City, especially New York City in the Marvel Universe. The Mojo story, I'm not going to spoil too much, but it might be my favorite story in this collection. And that's saying something because there's a lot of good stories in here. The Mystique story is by writer Sina McGuire. I might be butchering her name, but I love her. She writes a lot of good urban fantasy. She writes some sci-fi novels under the pen name Mira Grant. And then it has artist Marco Faya. Again, might be butchering the name. Oh, this is a bad episode for names. So the Mystique story shows just how cunning and brilliant and ruthless Mystique is. And the art really kind of captures her mid-transformation and just has that great fluidness to it. And I won't spoil too much of the Mystique story either, but it features her planning a solo break-in to Trask Industries, and that's all you're going to get on that story from me because you need to read it. All these are pretty short, like, read in one sitting, too. Next up, we have a Juggernaut story, which this is probably my least favorite, just because to me, it didn't change much for the character, but the Juggernaut story is really internally focused. He's in the Temple of the Sidorak, fighting with his inner demons, quite literally. So writer is Robbie Thompson, artist is Sean Crystal, color artist is Rika Renzi. The color artist especially did just a fantastic job of capturing Juggernaut's color palette here and really setting the stage for this story. Next up is another of my favorite stories, the Emma Frost story. Writers Leah Williams, penciler Chris Bacalo, several inkers, too many to list right now. So the Emma Frost story, again, I don't want to spoil too much, but it shows Emma being a commanding, really powerful presence as she enlists the X-Men's help. She's, once again, estranged from the X-Men. For anyone who doesn't know, Emma Frost has been a member of the Hellfire Club. That's how she was introduced. And then she defected to be a member of the X-Men. And now she's estranged from them again. But she reaches out to them because she wants to take the Hellfire Club down and go after Sebastian Shaw, who is the Black King. And I have to say, not a fan of the art. It's stylized in a way that makes all the women look like they're 14. Not my favorite style of art. Probably good for some people. Some people probably really like it. So, it's not art subjective. The last story is an apocalypse story written by Zach Thompson and Lonnie Nadler. Artist is Geraldo Borges. And this is the longest story. It's really trippy. Apocalypse is basically exploring some new technology and his never-ending quest for immortality and trying to find a way to make a body immortal that he can then take over. And something goes wrong, and his body ends up degenerating into a human body, and then degenerating into, like, a Neanderthal mindset, while this island around him, everything is evolving rapidly. And the artwork really kind of captures just this fantastical island. So that's kind of an interesting and weird story, and just all these stories are really great reads and really great insights into these villains. And I would definitely recommend that you give this a read if you like X-Men, if you like villains, if you like quick reads, like short stories. It's definitely the book for you. So I hope you all have a good week. Please drop in the comments which X-Men villain is your favorite. Let me know what you're reading this week. Let me know what you hope I review on the show next. I'm always looking for suggestions. I have a pretty big pile, but I would love to hear your suggestions. Really would. Have a great day and happy reading.